The moon is low and slow tonight, draped across the early morning sky like it forgot to clock out. A chill wanders lazily through the hills of Arcadia, rustling olive branches and making the dew-drenched grass feel just a little too clingy. You're barefoot, or at least that's what your dream-self insists, walking down a sloping hillside that smells faintly of thyme, sheep, and distant curiosity. Somewhere not too far off, a rooster begins to clear its throat and then immediately regrets it. It's too early even for the ambitious. Ahead of you lies a cave humble, mossy, and slightly disheveled, like a bachelor den but with more sacred mythological consequence. Inside, nestled among shadows and scattered goat hairs, is an infant trapped in a cloak far too dignified for someone who has finished teething. This, of course, is baby Hermes, future god of travelers, thieves, mischief, trade, and those weird coin pouches Renaissance fair guys like to wear. Born just a few hours ago on Mount Cyl lean to my a quiet, cave-dwelling nymph with serious single-mom resilience Hermes is not wasting time with things like infantile stillness. No, he's already plotting. Before we get into his questionable baby decisions, take a moment to settle in. Feel your blankets like folds of cloud. Let your body melt like wax in an old bronze lamp. And if you enjoy wandering through sleepy mythologies without getting tangled in drama, go ahead and like this video. Gently. No need to wake the algorithm. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of this dreamy, oversized myth. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. Hermes, freshly born, yawns like a cat with a secret. You watch him roll out of his swaddle like it's a corporate resignation. He stretches, smiles, and promptly crawls out of the cave. No one stops him because truly, who expects a newborn to organize livestock theft before lunch? He moves fast. Suspiciously fast. His eyes glint like HES already halfway through an alibi. Now, here's your historical fact in Greek mythology. Hermes was born at dawn and by noon had invented the Lyre and stolen Apollo's cattle. That's a productivity schedule that should not be adopted by modern influencers. He slips through the tall grasses, past shepherds still mid-snore, until he reaches a field full of sacred cows. Yes, Apollo's cows. The ones no one's supposed to touch. Hermes doesn't care. Or perhaps he does care, he just thinks rules are fun to rearrange. He drives the cows backward. That's right. He turns their hooves around so the tracks look like they're walking away from where HES actually taking them. Even in infancy, HES invented the reverse no card. Eventually, he hides the cows in a grove and tiptoes his way home, humming a little tune to himself, probably something just minus adjacent. And on his way back, he sees it a tortoise. Slow. Cool. Possibly asleep mid-step. You pause here, watching Hermes squat beside the tortoise. He taps its shell thoughtfully. It blinks once, unimpressed. What happens next is unexpected. Unless you're Hermes. He picks up the tortoise, peers into its shell, and gets an idea. The kind of idea that will echo through centuries of music, poetry, and weird statue poses. HES about to make the first lyre. Out of a tortoise. And some cow parts. Which, sure, is a choice. Historians still debate whether the Greeks genuinely believed a tortoise shell could be used as a working sound box, or if this was just mythic metaphor for we invented music and... needed a backstory. Back in the cave, Hermes assembles the instrument with uncanny calm. Cowgut strings. Tortoise shell bass. Bits of reed and twine. By the time Maya stirs from her nap, Hermes is already strumming like a lazy campfire bard. The music fills the cave plucky, sweet, and just a little smug. It's the first lyre, and yes, it's lapse. Your obscure tidbit in later centuries, Roman poets claimed that Hermes' lyre had 7 strings to match the 7 planets, making this possibly the first cosmic Spotify playlist. And now, the newborn god sits content, legs crossed, lyre in lap, Tortoise retired from its original career, music echoing softly off stone walls. And you? You're watching the firelight flicker across myth, invention, and soft mischief. The cave is worn. The air hums gently. And the story is just beginning. Morning creeps in over the hills like it's still deciding whether to fully commit. The cave is a little brighter now, with soft beams of light filtering through cracks in the stone like sleepy fingers poking through a wool blanket. You're still here, perched on a smooth rock beside Hermes, who is now fine-minus tuning his tortoise-minus shell lyre with the focus of a kid learning their first video game cheat code. Outside, the birds are starting to act like they invented morning. One particularly bold sparrow keeps dive-minus bombing a fig branch. There's no reason for it. Some people just wake up chaotic. Maya, meanwhile, is awake. Barely. She stands at the mouth of the cave, rubbing her temples with the look of a mother who just realized her baby skipped crawling and went straight to larceny. Hermes gives her a sheepish smile, one that's 20% charm, 80% confession. You step outside with them, as the sun begins to warm the dew-minus-drenched valley. It's quiet in the way that only high places can be, birds chirping, distant sheep noises, and the occasional twang from a lyre being held by someone who really should still be in a crib. Remember those cows? Apollo has noticed. Hes not thrilled. The god of the sun and reason is now stomping across the hills in radiant fury. Hes glowing slightly, which is either divine wrath or just very aggressive natural deodorant. His hair is perfect, his tunic spotless. The man brings main-minus character energy to every minor inconvenience. Hermes doesn't panic. He simply sets down the lyre, adjusts his tiny god-minus baby blanket, and begins crafting a defense that would make any modern lawyer weep with admiration. Apollo arrives at the cave, flanked by shepherds and sunbeams. He demands justice. Maya sighs and gestures toward her son with a weary shrug. Hermes denies everything. He says he was asleep. He says Hes just a baby. He says perhaps the cows wandered off on their own, or perhaps Apollo misplaced them. Ever think of that? Here's your historical fact. Hermes famously lied to Apollo's face and got away with it briefly. It was one of the earliest examples of divine trickery that actually amused the other gods instead of turning into a thunderbolt situation. Eventually, Zeus is called in to mediate. Classic. The king of Olympus descends from the clouds, sandals glowing with executive indecision. He listens to both sides, Apollo steaming, Hermes smiling, and finally says something to the effect of, "Let's not ruin brunch over this." So Hermes does what all good accidental criminals do. He distracts. He picks up the lyre. He plays. And the cave fills with music unlike anything heard before. The sound is gentle, warm, and impossibly sweet. Even the birds pause to listen. Apollo's anger melts like butter in a sunbeam. Zeus raises an eyebrow. Maya sighs again, but this time with a touch of pride. The lyre, this strange little tortoise-minus-cow hybrid, sings with golden sound. It hums of sunrise, of laughter, of being forgiven even when you absolutely do not deserve it. Hermes offers it to Apollo as a gift or a bribe. Both, really. Apollo takes it, and everything shifts. That's the moment right there when music becomes divine. When the lyre becomes the instrument of poets, lovers, dreamers, and one very confused tortoise. And Hermes. He gets away with the cattle incident, walks off with a new title, and adds inventor of music to his growing resume. Obscure tidbits, some versions of the myth say that Apollo, in return, gave Hermes a golden staff the caduceus later associated with medicine and modern pharmacy logos. So basically, music and healthcare were born from a cow theft. Hermes grins, hands empty, reputation intact. Apollo plucks at the lyre's strings, nodding slowly. And you? You sit back on the cool stone. The breeze gently to ustling your hair, and let the notes skirl around you like mist. The world doesn't feel quite real. But the music, that's real enough. The sun is fully awake now, stretching across the sky like it's clocked in for a long shift. You're back on the hillside path, wandering aimlessly through the crisp, golden light. A lizard scurries across your foot and pauses, perhaps wondering if you're edible or just dramatically slow. You nod at it respectfully. It nods back. Probably. Ahead of you, Hermes is skipping stones across a lazy stream, the kind that doesn't care much about reaching the sea. He hums a tune his tune the one from the lyre. It sticks in your head like a lullaby whispered by someone who's definitely stolen your shoes. You catch up to him as he flips over a flat rock, revealing a beetle the size of your thumbnail and a tiny scroll tied to its back. Hermes snorts. Wrong delivery, he mutters, sending the beetle on its way. Because now that Hes invented music, it's time for his next act, messenger of the gods. But unlike other divine roles, Hermes didn't wait to be assigned. He more or less volunteered. Loudly, repeatedly, and with enough charm that Zeus finally gave him the official title. Your historical fact for this section: Hermes became the official herald of Olympus, the only god allowed to freely travel between Earth, Olympus, and the underworld. He basically invented multitasking. To prepare for his new job, Hermes needs gear. And unlike modern couriers, he isn't interested in neutral colors or practical shoes. You want style? You follow him to a clearing where Hes experimenting with winged sandals, talaria, as the fancy poets would later call them. They're small leather shoes with golden feathers sprouting from the sides, fluttering slightly like they're considering flight. The first time he tries them on, he trips over a root and face plants into a bush. The second time, he floats 3 inches off the ground and does a slow, smug pirouette. It's fine. Hes a quick learner. Next, the hotter pedasos, broad minus brimmed and tilted just enough to look mischievous. He adds wings to that too, because why stop at your feet? Then comes the staff. Not the golden one from Apollo, yet that comes later, but a simple stick carved with spiral symbols and crowned with 2 snakes made from bits of braided grass. It's not magical. Yet. But it looks official, and sometimes that's half the battle. Obscure tidbit in some ancient sources, Hermes was believed to carry dreams in his staff, using it to touch the eyes of mortals and deliver messages while they slept. Imagine that. A god who slides into your dreams like a divine text message. Now fully outfitted, Hermes gives you a mock salute. Time to deliver, he says, and takes off, not running, not walking, but skimming the air like Hes made of breeze and impatience. You don't follow. You just sit under a fig tree and watch the clouds move. He zips across fields, over hills, down to the shoreline, and back again in minutes. Messages are left with villagers, farmers, kings, and one particularly confused goat. And as you sit there, the sound of wind and leaves begins to match your breath. Slow, rhythmic, carried by something you can't quite name. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it would be like to be a god of and minus betweens. Not stuck in Olympus, not trapped on Earth. Just always in motion. Hermes returns eventually, less out of necessity and more out of mischief. He tosses you a peach and says, "Don't ask where I got it." You don't. Because some things, especially when handed to you by a winged child minus god, are better enjoyed without explanation. Evening eases in like it's been watching the whole time and has decided now is the moment to dim the lights. Shadows lengthen. Cicadas begin their chorus. Somewhere behind you, a sheep sneezes in a way that feels philosophical. You and Hermes sit on a flat stone, legs dangling, watching the sun melt behind distant mountains. Hes plucking at a new lyre now, this one smaller, polished, sounding like rain hitting the inside of a warm clay jar. "Want to hear a story?" he asks. You nod because obviously. And so he begins to speak not as the star of the tale, but as its delivery boy. Which, let's face it, is entirely his brand. He tells you about a mortal named Battus. Just a regular man. Not heroic. Not tragic. Just present. One day, Battus sees Hermes herding Apollo's stolen cattle and gets a front-minus-row seat to the divine heist. Hermes, ever the negotiator, offers him a bribe to keep quiet. A cow. Maybe two. Who's counting? Battus agrees. But the moment Hermes leaves, Battus spills everything. Probably with dramatic flair. The man cow didn't even wait until the credits rolled. Hermes returns in disguise and asks Battus what he saw. Battus tells the same story. Hermes raises an eyebrow and turns him to stone. Your historical fact Hermes didn't always reward honesty. In this myth, he punished betrayal of confidence even when that confidence involved divine cattle theft. Trust, apparently, outranks legality. You glance sideways at Hermes. He shrugs. Loyalty matters, he says. Especially when you're inventing rules as you go. The wind picks up slightly. You notice how the stars are starting to appear, first one, then three, then a scattered dozen. The lyre in Hermes' lap glows faintly under starlight, as if absorbing memory. He shifts gears and starts telling jokes. Some good, some less so. Most involve donkeys. Then he pauses. "Want to see the underworld?" he asks. You blink. Not the seg you expected. But Hermes is the only god allowed safe passage and undoubt. Hes, the guide of souls. Psychopompos, the ancient Greeks called him. Fancy word for divine escort to death. You nod slowly. He stands, brushes off his tunic, and says, "Don't worry. We're just visiting." Obscure tidbit in some ancient rituals, people would whisper to Hermes at crossroads and grave sites, asking him to deliver messages to the dead. No postage required. As you both descend the trail, the stars above twinkle like old secrets. Hermes hums again, low and slow. The notes wrap around you like a blanket spun from sound. And as you step past a cluster of cypress trees, tall, dark, still you feel the air change. Not colder, just quieter. You follow him, because what else is there to do? Some journeys you don't plan. You just walk them. The descent is quiet. Not the kind of ominous, storm-minus gathering quiet you get in tragedy, but the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring with your own breath. Cypress trees sway gently, their narrow shadows drawing long inclines across the dirt path. The stars above state a light present, but not intrusive. Hermes walks ahead of you, calm as a cat in a palace it didn't build but has claimed anyway. His winged sandals don't flap or glow dramatically. They simply do the job. You're starting to suspect that being a god isn't all thunderbolts and fanfare. It's a lot of walking, some lying, and an uncanny knack for pretending you were invited. You arrive at a narrow cave entrance, just large enough for the brave or the overly curious. The rocks here are darker, almost bluish, slick with condensation that never seems to dry. Hermes gestures to the cave with a half-minus smile. "This is just the lobby," he says. "No one's dying today. Hopefully." You duck through the opening. Inside, The air turns colder not aggressively, but thoughtfully, like a memory you didn't know you still carried. The tunnel spirals downward, and the light fades gradually. No torches, no guiding glow. Just Hermes humming an old song under his breath and the subtle shimmer of phosphorescent moss lighting the walls. This, he says, is how souls pass with no fanfare, no ceremony, just a quiet walk through the world's forgotten places. Eventually, the tunnel opens up into a wide cavern. A river trickles slowly through the center, dark and silent. Not rushing, not babbling, just moving with the confidence of a path that's been walked for centuries. And this is the underworld, or at least one of the side doors. No Kerberos, no fire, no judgment scales. Just calm shadows, soft whispers, and a smell like damp stones and fig leaves. Here's your historical fact. Hermes was the only Olympian permitted to escort souls to the underworld and return unharmed. He didn't rule over death, he simply guided others through it. The Greeks had a word for this psycho-pompo as soul conductor. You watch as Hermes crouches by the river and dips his fingers in the water. Ripples extend slowly, unnaturally wide. Reflections don't behave here. One shows a woman gathering grain. Another, a laughing boy chasing a dog that's no longer alive. You blink. The ripples vanish. Hermes doesn't speak for a while. You aren't either. It feels wrong, too. After some time, he stands and walks to a stone bench carved directly from the cavern wall. You sit beside him. The stone is cold, but your skin adjusts. You know, he says quietly, most people think of this place as punishment. Fire, darkness, fear. But really, where the stories go after they've been told. You glance around. There are no chains, no screams. Just echoes. Lots of them. Sometimes faint music. Once, a sigh that might weave in a breeze. Obscure tidbits. Some ancient texts describe the underworld as having multiple regions, including the asphaltal meadows, where most souls went neither good nor bad, just ordinary. Eternal MEH. You lean back against the cool stone and watch a line of pale figures crossing the water on a barely visible bridge. They don't seem afraid, just tired. The kind of tired you feel in your bones after a long harvest or a longer goodbye. Hermes watches them too. They don't remember much, he says. Bits and pieces. A name, a song, a moment in the sun. He taps his lyre gently. One note echoes soft and round. It lingers in the cave longer than it should, like a guest reluctant to leave. Historians still debate whether the Greeks saw Hermes as a grim escort or a kind one. Some stories depict him as merciful, a god who whispered to the dead and lead them gently. Others say he was indifferent, focused more on duty than comfort. There's no consensus. You suppose both can be true. Eventually, Hermes stands. That's enough shadow for now, he says, not unkindly. Let's go back before the river starts asking questions. The climb out is slower, heavier, as if the air itself wants you to stay. But the stars grow brighter with every step upward, and the smell of soil returns. Trees greet you again at the exit, and an owl blinks once, then ignores you completely. You sit on a rock just outside the cave, letting the night wrap around you like a favorite-old blanket. Hermes stretches. Being between worlds is exhausting. You laugh, but only a little, because you understand now. The stars above are showing off now, spilled across the sky like powdered sugar on a black silk tablecloth. You lie back in the grass while Hermes roots around in his satchel, eventually pulling out a fig and a small, slightly squashed loaf of bread. He tears the fig in half, offers you a piece. It's sweet, messy, and unapologetic. Somewhere nearby, a stream gurgles sleepily over smooth stones. Crickets tune their instruments. Hermes chews thoughtfully. You ever hear the one about how I invented fire sticks? You shake your head mouthful. Well, he begins reclining next to you. It was a cold night. Like this one. Too much wind. Not enough hospitality. So I thought, what if we took the sticks and bullied them into heat? According to one version of the myth, yes, it varies. Hermes was credited with inventing fire minus by minus friction, though others say it was Prometheus. Of course, Prometheus is more famous for stealing fire from Olympus, while Hermes was more likely to claim he accidentally discovered it during a snack break. Your historical fact: Hermes was associated with fire minus starting tools, especially in rural myths, making him a patron of hearths and travel alike. A god of motion, but also warmth. As Hermes continues explaining the mechanics of strategic stick conflict, he gestures toward the embers of an old campfire. He pokes at them idly with the twig, as if coaxing memory instead of flame. The conversation drifts like smoke. He tells you how shepherds used to whisper prayers to him before setting off with their flock's simple requests for safe passage, good weather, and no awkward encounters with panicked nymphs. You ask him if he ever answered. He shrugs. Sometimes. Obscure tidbit: in certain villages, travelers left small offerings in hollow stones at crossroads, bits of honey, tiny coins, even locks of hair for Hermes to ensure their journey was cursed by confusion or go to tax. You both sit in silence for a while. It's not awkward, just full. A breeze brushes through the trees like a bard testing a new song. Then Hermes says something soft. The thing about being everywhere is that you don't always belong anywhere. You glance at him. For the first time, he looks tired. Not sad. Just stretched. Like a rope pulled too far between too many posts. He lies back, hands folded over his chest, eyes to the stars. You meet everyone, he says, but you never really stay. The words settle into the grass beside you, pressing gently into the quiet. You don't answer. Not because there's nothing to say, but because the silence deserves the space. After a while, Hermes sits up and stretches. All right? Enough brooding. Time to teach you something useless. You blink. Useless? He grins. Ever wonder how to read messages from olives? You weren't wondering that. But now, apparently, you are. He pulls a small branch from his bag, sets it upright, and begins explaining how the shape of the pits, when dried, can vaguely resemble Greek letters if you squint hard enough and suspend disbelief. Historians still argue whether this was divination, he says, or just very bored shepherds in windy fields. Your eel laughing now softly as he launches into a demonstration that results in absolutely no wisdom whatsoever. And that, perhaps, is the real magic of Hermes. Not the tricks, not the inventions, but the moments where nothing needs to be achieved, and yet everything is understood. You both lean back again, watching a shooting star draw a lazy exclamation mark across the sky. He nudges you gently with his elbow. Still awake? Barely. Good, he says. We've got more to wander tomorrow. And with that, the wind wraps itself around you again, slow and soft. The grass sways like a lullaby in motion. And sleep, finally, decides to walk beside you. You wake up to the gentle prod of a sandal in your ribcage. Hermes stands above you, hair suspiciously perfect for someone who slept in a meadow, already chewing on something that may or may not be food. Rise and shine, he says. We've got temples to annoy. The sky is overcast, but only politely clouds gathered like sleepy elders around a fire, offering shade more than gloom. You stretch, bones cracking like old papiers, and follow him down the winding path. Today, he tells you, is about boundaries, not the emotional kind, unfortunately, but the literal kind. Land markers, stone piles, road shrines. This, he insists, is one of his lesser minus known gigs. Your first stop is a crossroads. Just dirt paths cutting through wildflowers and dry grass. At the center sits a Hermes short square pillar with a carved head, his, obviously unwell. Let's just say there's a prominent anatomical detail involved. You look. You look away. You look again because curiosity is human and Hermes is smirking. Here's your historical fact in ancient Greece. Small roadside shrines called Hermes were dedicated to Hermes. These were considered sacred markers, believed to protect travelers, bless boundaries, and awkwardly ensure fertility. They were often placed at crossroads, doorways, and field edges. Hermes kicks a pebble at the base of the Herm. Nice likeness, he says. The sculptor got my nose wrong, though. You circle the pillar, noticing worn offerings tucked at its base, bits of dried fruit, a clay bead, a coin. One of them looks like a tooth, which you wisely choose not to investigate. As you walk, Hermes explains that crossroads are his favorite places. Anything can happen there, he muses. It's where choices live, where people pause. He says this with the tone of someone who's made and dodged many choices. You reach another Herm down the road, this one older, cracked with time and half minus buried in weeds. Hermes kneels beside it and gently brushes the dirt away. You'd be surprised how many prayers were whispered here, he says. Not shouted, just hoped. Obscure tidbit Greek travelers would often murmur a short phrase to Hermes at each turn they passed, something like "guide me," or "keep the dogs at bay." No ceremony, just habit. He asks you to try. You face the pillar, clear your throat, and whisper something that sounds more like a grocery list than a sacred request. Hermes chuckles. It counts, he says. As the path curves uphill, he begins to tell you stories of boundary blurring, of gods pretending to be mortals, and mortals accidentally angering gods by peeing on the wrong stone. True myth. Look it up. You reach the top of the hill, and below you lies a patchwork of fields, each marked by more Hermes' tiny sentinels standing between wheat, goats, and olive trees. Hermes sighs. I used to know every one of these, he says. Every path, every stone, every step. You glance at him. HES still smiling. But there's something in his voice, distance, maybe. The wind picks up, brushing the grass in wide waves. It makes the land feel like it's breathing. Or thinking. Hermes points to a fork in the road. Go left, you get figs. Go right, you meet a man who thinks he is a prophet because he once sneezed during an eclipse. You choose left. Figs sound nice. He grins and follows. The fig tree is older than the path itself. Its branches twist like braided hair, its leaves large enough to shade a donkey. Beneath it sits an old man with a basket and a knife, peeling figs with the precision of a retired oracle. He doesn't look up when you arrive. Hermes greets him casually, like they've known each other for years. They probably have. The man nods once, hands you both a fig, then returns to his slicing. You sit under the tree. The fruit is sticky and warm, sweet in a way that makes your molars ache politely. You like games? Hermes asks suddenly. You nod. Good, he says. Because today we're talking about dice words and lying convincingly in public. Excellent. Here's your historical fact. Hermes was considered the patron of gamblers, merchants, and persuasive speakers. If something involved chance, wit, or convincing someone to hand over their coins, Hermes was spiritually involved. He pulls out a small pouch and empties its contents into his palm, smooth knuckle bones, used like dice. He rolls them once. A6. A2. a mark that looks like a goat doing yoga. You ask what it means. Depends, he says. Did you bet on it? You shake your head. Then it means nothing. You pass the time playing a game that involves counting stars, saying tongue minus whispers in ancient Greek, and pretending you don't notice when Hermes cheats. He as a graceful cheater. The kind that makes you admire the effort. After a while, the old man clears his throat and finally speaks. Tell him about Antigua Nos. Hermes groans. Do I have to? The man nods, solemn. Fine, Hermes says. But in skipping the boring parts, he begins telling the story of a merchant named Antigua Nos, who thought he could cheat Hermes out of an offering by hiding his coins in a bag of dried lentils. Hermes naturally swapped the coins with pebbles, then delivered the bag to Hades by accident. Hades was not thrilled. Moral of the story, don't trick the god who invented tricking. Obscure tidbit: ancient Greek merchants often inscribed tiny prayers to Hermes on weights and scales, hoping for good luck in trade. Imagine asking your calculator to be merciful. The sun leans westward now, casting long golden fingers across the field. You lie back on the grass and stare up at the leaves shifting overhead. Hermes lies beside you, humming again. I don't care much for temples, he admits. Too serious. Too stiff. But fig trees know how to listen. You ask him why he helps mortals at all. Hes quiet for a moment. Because they move, he says. They fall. They get up. They make stories. And someone's got to carry those stories. You nod. A breeze nudges a fig loose from the tree. It lands near your foot. You both stare at it for a moment. Best 2 out of 3. Hermes asks, rolling the knuckle bones again. You smile. Some gods rule. Some gods protect. Hermes. He plays. And in the play, he remembers us. You wake to a goat chewing on your blanket. Hermes, unbothered, is already halfway up a low stone ridge, whistling something that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. The sky is wide and pale, and the air smells like crushed thyme and cheap opinions. Today, he says, is about language. Not just talking, but the very first talking. Which, according to Hermes, he may or may not have invented while waiting for soup to cool. As you hike the ridge together, he tells you how humans once wandered the world in wordless wonder. They gestured. They hummed. They occasionally threw rocks to express complex feelings like you stepped on my foot. But then slowly names began to emerge, first for things, then for feelings, then for what we think the gods want when they're not returning our calls. Words, Hermes says, are just very elaborate lies we agree to believe together. Here's your historical fact: Hermes was the god of language, rhetoric, and translation. In classical Greece, he was believed to bestow eloquence and clever speech, especially to those who needed to lie with grace or self-ish with flair. You reach the top of the ridge, where the wind slaps your face with mild enthusiasm. At the summit stands a carved stone pillar inscribed not with pictures or scenes, but with letters. Curved, etched, worn down by years of weather and wandering. These, Hermes says, running a finger along the grooves, are some of the oldest alphabetic symbols in this region. Phoenician roots, Greek branches. All very squiggly. You trace the marks too. They feel deep, purposeful, tired, maybe. Obscure tidbit: the Greek alphabet was adapted from the Phoenician script, and Hermes was said to have taught mortals how to refine it, adding vowels, rhythm, and the ability to make poetry sound less like yelling. Below the ridge, a small village bustles quietly. Hermes decides it's time for a lesson in commerce. You descend, wind in your hair and dust in your teeth. At the village market, Hermes walks through the stalls with the ease of someone who's never paid for anything but knows the exact value of everything. You watch him haggle a fish down from 5 drachma to a song and a wink. Merchants greet him with equal parts affection and suspicion. A boy selling pongratines mutters trickster under his breath, but hands over a fruit anyway. Trade, Hermes says, tossing the fruit in the air, is just a conversation where everyone pretends to win. You follow him to the center of the market, where he sits on a barrel and begins to tell a story to passing children about a tortoise who married a cloud, or a crow who tried to bribe the wind. The details shift. The metaphors stretch. You're not sure what the moral is. You're not sure there is one. But the kids laugh. The adults listen. And someone drops a coin at his feet. He nods toward it. See? Words work. Historians still debate whether Hermes was truly worshipped as the inventor of language or simply celebrated as its best user. Ancient texts give him credit for rhetoric, lyric poetry, and persuasive speech, though some argue this role came later, grafted onto older myths like a patch on a well-used cloak. As the market begins to empty, Hermes stands, brushing fig leaves from his tunic. Let's walk, he says. I've got a story that needs hearing. You follow, because that's what you do now. The road is older than the trees that lean over it. You walk beside Hermes as he tells you about a hill just a little further where the gods once met in secret to argue about a turtle. Or maybe a treaty. The story is hazy. He shrugs. It was loud. The trees thin out, revealing a small clearing carpeted in soft grass and ringed with standing stones. Not grand, not dramatic, just present, like the place has been listening for a very long time. This, Hermes says, is where I told my first lie. You blink. Big one, he adds. Told Zeus I had no idea who knocked over his olive oil jar. I was still holding the jar. You sit on a low rock. Hermes paces slowly, arms behind his back, as if rehearsing for a speech HES given 100 times. Lying, he begins, isn't always bad. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's art. Sometimes it's just timing. Your historical fact, Hermes was considered the divine patron of liars and thieves not because lying was noble, but because it was clever. In Greek culture, cleverness and adaptability were often valued just as much as bravery or strength. He tells you how lies, when told for the right reasons, can protect. How a gentle lie can save a life or preserve a story until it's ready to be told. Obscure tidbit in certain rural festivals, actors dressed as Hermes would go around telling deliberate tall tales to strangers, tiny lies meant to confuse, delight, or reveal who was too serious to laugh. It was considered a blessing to be tricked kindly. You watch as Hermes picks up a smooth stone and begins to carve it, not words, not pictures, but a pattern of dots and lines. This, he says, is how I used to code my lies, in case I needed to remember them later. You ask if he ever forgot one. Only once, he says, and it cost me a goat and a bet with Artemis he'll never live down. As the sun drops lower, the shadows from the standing stones begin to stretch like fingers reaching toward the edge of memory. Hermes grows quiet. You sit beside him again, the breeze lifting your hair, carrying with it the scent of pine and stories. He finally says, "Do you think lies die when we stop telling them?" You think about it. "No," you answer. "They just rest." He nods, then adds, "Good. That means I can use them again later." The laughter you share is light, not loud. And in that fading light, surrounded by soft wind and ancient stones, you feel the weight of language, deception, and charm. And somehow none of it feels heavy. Just human. Just old. Just Hermes. Dawn comes reluctantly, like a cat deciding whether to knock over your favorite mug. A pale wash of light spills across the trees, And somewhere above, a bird tries out a song, forgets the words, and gives up. Hermes is already awake, of course, balancing on a tree stump, whittling something small and pointy while humming a tune that keeps changing keys. Today, he says, is about sleep and dreams, his more obscure domain. Yes, the messenger god, boundary minus breaker, and expert cow thief also moonlights as an escort through the world of dreams. Fitting, really. H.E.S., the only one quick enough to catch them before they dissolve. You follow him through a quiet glen thick with moss and low minus hanging branches. It smells like wet bark and half minus remembered stories. He pauses beside a hollow tree and pulls out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth inside, a delicate reed flute and a pouch of dried herbs. Most people don't know, he says, but I helped people sleep. Still do. You just never see me. Except maybe in dreams where your teeth fall out. He explains that in the old days, travelers would place little tokens under their pillows, smooth stones. Bird feathers, bits of braided wool and whisper, his name for a peaceful journey through the night. Here's your historical fact. Hermes was believed to guide dreams, often delivering messages from the gods through sleep. In some versions of the myth, he worked closely with Hypno-Sleep and Morpheus dreams, carrying dream-minus visions to sleeping mortals like divine postcards. You arrive at a grove of poppies tall, reed, swaying lazily in the breeze like they're still mostly asleep themselves. Hermes hands you a few petals and tells you to chew gently. It tastes like honey mixed with old paper and makes your limbs feel slightly unhinged. You lie down on the grass. He sits beside you and begins to play. The flute sound is breathy, more suggestion than melody. Notes rise and fall like sighs. You feel your thoughts loosen, your eyes blur. Everything tilts. He whispers as he plays not words, but impressions. A memory of warm bread. A trail through fog. The feeling of being safe in your own bones. And then, somehow, you're dreaming. Not a dream you've had before, but one that feels ancient and new. You're standing at a river made of ink, watching birds recite poems from scrolls tied to their feet. A mountain nearby exhales. A giant snail offers you tea. You blink. Hermes is there too, of course, sketching patterns in the air with his flute. This is where stories come from, he says, before they're told, before they're even named. Obscure tidbits. Some ancient Greeks believed dreams entered the mind through specific gates, one of horn for truth, and one of ivory for deception. Hermes, naturally, could pass through both. You walk through the dream mine escape together, watching visions flicker and undoubt, a child planting coins like seeds, a woman turning laughter into thread, a man trying to race the wind and losing gracefully. You ask if he controls all of this. He shakes his head. I don't write the dreams, he says. I just deliver the mail. Eventually, the poppy grove returns. You wake slowly, limbs heavy, mouth dry. The sun is higher now, birds louder. Hermes is chewing on a stick. Good nap? He asks. You nod. Because it was. The path bends again, as it always does with Hermes. He never walks in straight lines unless HE's hiding something. Now you're headed downhill toward the sea. You can smell the salt before you see it, the sharp tang that wakes your senses just enough to remind you how much land you've left behind. The beach is empty except for driftwood, lazy waves, and a strange collection of objects Hermes has clearly gathered over time, a lyre missing to strings. A helmet with a dent the size of a fist, and what appears to be an old sandal with someone else's name carved into the sole. This, he announces proudly, is my museum of things I may have borrowed. The sea shimmers under a hazy sky, and the whole beach feels like the forgotten edge of the world. He tells you today's lesson is about travel, not the epic kind with dragons and storms, but the ordinary kind. The minus between places. The waiting moments. The long walks between destinations. People think journeys are about where you go, he says. But really, it's about who you are when your feet stop moving. Here's your historical fact. Hermes was the god of travelers and boundaries, and ancient Greeks would pray to him before leaving home, especially when their journey crossed into the unknown. Which, to be fair, was most places before Google Maps. You watch him build a tiny cairn from shells and stones. Not big, just enough to mark that someone was here, that someone walked this path. Most people leave nothing behind, he says. But even a footstep is a kind of story. Obscure tidbit in some coastal towns, sailors offered Hermes tiny folded sails made of linen and inked prayers. These were burned at departure, with the smoke believed to carry their wishes across the water. Hermes asks you to close your eyes and imagine the last place you left the way the air felt. The people you didn't say goodbye to. The version of yourself who thought they knew where they were going. You do. It's quieter than you expected. When you open your eyes, Hermes standing ankle-minus deep in the sea, skipping stones. Want to see a trick? He calls. He skips one that doesn't bounce, but arcs upward instead, higher and higher until it vanishes behind a cloud. That one was for Poseidon, he says. He likes shiny things. The tide is coming in now, slowly reclaiming the beach. Hermes leads you along the shore, telling stories of journeys Hermes guided, some epic, some tender, some forgotten. There was a girl who walked 10 days just to whisper at her father's grave. A sailor who died before reaching home, but whose story kept walking without him. A boy who left with anger and returned with laughter. The road doesn't remember your footsteps, he says, but it remembers the weight. You ask if he ever tires of traveling. He smiles. No, but I do miss standing still sometimes. You both stop at a weathered jetty. The wood creaks underfoot. Barnacles cling to the posts like they're afraid of being left behind. Hermes hands you a piece of driftwood, smooth and warm from the sun. Write something, he says. You hesitate. Doesn't matter what, he adds. It's not for you. You use a rock to scratch a single word into the wood. He nods approvingly and tosses it into the tide. The sea takes it. Slowly. No fanfare. Just memory. Drifting. By now, the road is starting to feel like an old friend, familiar, winding, slightly judgmental. You walk alongside Hermes again, past low hills dotted with juniper bushes and rocks, shaped suspiciously like sleeping sheep. Hermes in a quiet mood today. Still smiling, but the kind of smile people wear when they're remembering something and trying not to. You ask him what's next. He replies, justice. You pause. He doesn't. Not courtroom justice, he says. Real justice. The kind with no judges and no paperwork. Just balance. And memory. You continue uphill until you reach a wide clearing where the ground is black and ashy. Not fresh, not ruined. Just paused. At the center stands a singled all-pillar carved with names. Not full names. Just syllables. Echoes. Once, Hermes says, this was where oaths were sworn. Not the public kind. The personal kind. Promises made at crossroads, whispered into wind. Your historical fact, Hermes, was invoked in oaths and pacts, especially those made in secret. While Zeus handled official contracts, Hermes presided over promises made quietly, often in private. He walks to the pillar and places his hand on it. Some of these names, he says, were never spoken again. But the promises, they still hum in the stone. Obscure tidbit in some rural shrines. People would bind knots into cords and hang them beside Hermes statues to seal private vows, kind of like tying a ribbon on your guilt and hoping the gods were good at filing. You sit near the base of the pillar. The wind here is steady, not harsh. It sounds like breath. Hermes tells you about a soldier who swore never to raise his sword again. About a woman who vowed to wait until spring for her beloved. About a liar who promised never to lie again and mostly kept it. You ask if all the promises were kept. Hermes shrugs. No, but they were made. That counts for something. He offers you a small scrap of cloth, dyed blue, and a bit of old twine. Tie it, he says. Say nothing. Just let it know you mean it. You tie the knot slowly. Not tightly. Just enough to hold. The cloth flutters in the breeze. Hermes nods. You stay there for a while, the silence comfortable, the sky cloudless. Then he says, want to see the place where words break? Because of course he does. You don't ask what the place where words break means. You've learned it not to. The walk is long, but gentle. You pass through groves of cedar and cypress, the air resinous and sweet. Hermes walks ahead, hands clasped behind his back, like a tour guide with secrets. Eventually, the path narrows to a canyon carved between two cliffs. The walls are high, smooth, and pale, as if the earth cracked open just to whisper something private. You step inside. Your voice echoes, but only a little. The space seems to hush you gently, without threat. This, Hermes says, is where I taught mortals the value of silence. You raise an eyebrow. Oh, I talk plenty, he says. But even I know when not to. Your historical fact, Hermes was the god of boundaries, including not just physical borders, but conversational ones. In many myths, he acted as the mediator, the translator, the one who spoke when others couldn't or shouldn't. He leads you to a rock worn smooth by centuries of weather and waiting. Use it. He joins you. There was once a girl who came here every year. He says to speak the one thing she wasn't allowed to say anywhere else. She'd whisper it into the cliff, and it would take it. Not solve it. Just take it. You look at the stone, suddenly aware of how many things it may have heard. Things people couldn't carry anymore. Things they couldn't tell their lovers or their gods. Obscure tidbits some cults believed cliffs and canyons were sacred confessionals, places where Hermes, as a messenger, could intercept your secret and decide whether to deliver it or bury it in stone. You close your eyes and listen. There are no birds here. Just the soft scrape of wind, the occasional pebble falling, and the echo of your own heartbeat. Hermes doesn't ask you to speak. He simply pulls a bit of chalk from his pocket, hands it to you, and points at the rock wall. You don't know what to write, so you don't write a word. You draw a line. Simple, uncertain, but yours. He smiles. That's enough. You walk back out of the canyon slowly, the world growing louder with each step, birds returning, insects buzzing, your own thoughts uncoiling. At the edge, Hermes says, some words are only meant to be carried, not delivered. You nod, because you feel lighter now, like something found a place to rest. He looks up at the sky, checking the time by the angle of a shadow. Almost done, he says. One more story, and then he'll let you go. You ask if you've passed the test. He laughs. There was no test. There was only the walk. You glance back at the canyon. The stone is still, but you think maybe it remembers. And so do you. The last path curves gently around a hill glazed with soft light. Everything is quiet now, but not empty. You can hear the bees, the hush of distant leaves, the muted crunch of your steps on dry earth. Hermes walks beside you in silence, for once not narrating, not gesturing, not charming. Just walking. Just present. You climb together until the slope flattens into a ridge. Below is the valley you crossed days ago, or was it weeks? dusted in gold with ribbons of water glinting under the late afternoon sun. Everything looks smaller from up here, even the gods. At the center of the ridge is a small altar. Unremarkable. Unpainted. Just stone. Worn down where hands have touched it too many times to count. Hermes steps forward and places the tiny offering a single olive, a coin worn blank, and a feather from one of his own winged sandals. Final stops, he says softly, should always be small. Use it on the edge of the ridge and swing your legs like a child who has not yet decided where they're going. Hermes joins you, lying back in the grass, arms folded behind his head, gazing at the slowly changing sky. So, he says, here we are. You nod. You both are. He begins to tell you his last story, not about thievery or poetry or dreams. Not even about gods. It's about a boy. A mortal boy who once got lost in the hills and, instead of panicking, whispered a prayer to Hermes at every fork in the road. The story is simple. The boy didn't find treasure. He didn't become famous. But he made it home, every time, and he always left a pebble behind to say thank you. That, Hermes says, is worship. Not temples. Not gold. Just memory with manners. Here's your final historical fact. Hermes was the most human of the gods, not because he was perfect, but because he moved. Because he understood chaos, and mischief, and doubt. The Greeks didn't just fear him or revere him. They saw themselves in him. You look out over the hills, feeling the ache of the journey, not pain, not regret. Just the quiet soreness of having carried something real. Hermes hands you one last object, a cord. Not grand. Not glowing. Just a simple piece of knotted thread. For when you forget, he says, you slip it into your pocket. He doesn't say goodbye. He just walks slowly down the opposite slope. The wind lifts behind him, playful and warm. Use it there for a while. Longer than necessary. And then, when the sky finally turns, its softest blue in the shadows, stretch like dreams just waking. You lie down in the grass. The earth holds you. The wind hums through the wild thyme. And everything slows. Now the walk is done. You wandered through caves and crossroads, through fig groves and boundary stones, through markets where words were currency and dreams were folded into poppy petals. You've watched a baby god steal cattle, invent the lyre, charm the sun, and walk softly through the underworld like it was just another path home. And now, you rest. Let your breath fall gently. Let your thoughts dissolve like footprints behind you. You don't need to hold the stories. They're already holding you. Remember the fig tree, where the wind carried secrets. Remember the canyon, where silence was not empty, but sacred. Remember the altar at the end, so small and ordinary, and yet somehow. Enough? Tonight, there is no temple, no verdict, no thunder from the sky. Only the slow rhythm of your heart, the softness of your own presence, and the feeling that someone somewhere still walks the road ahead of you. If you forget, that's all right. Just tie a small knot. Whisper your name, and let the journey remember you. Sleep now. The messenger has already moved on, but the story is still here, and it always will be.